Dear all, thank you for coming and joining us tonight at Buksa for our continuous conversation on authors and translators. First of all, I would like to thank Dušica and her colleagues at Buksa to willingly accept our proposal to host our program called Translators Horizons. This is a new program of our Association of Croatian Literary Translators related to recently opened residency for translators and writers, and of course that we widen our horizons in our mutual exchange in our encounters. I would also like to thank Ministry of Culture and Media who recognized and understood our wish to fulfill our long-lasting dream to have our residency. So finally it started in April this year, and our tonight's guest is our sixth resident. So please welcome our Colombian friend, poet and writer and musician and theater director Mario Angel Quintero from Medellin, who just only landed yesterday and we just didn't give him any break. So welcome.
Thanks very much.
I'm so thrilled and how to say, almost cannot believe that I can greet Mario again in Zagreb. He has already been here. Maybe you can tell us something about your first visit.
Yeah, on my first visit I came to be part of the pen version of the Fraktura World Literature Festival, and I fell in love with the city. I enjoyed my time here immensely. I felt a real contact with people when I was here. And so I've been looking for ways to get an excuse to come back ever since, and I'm very happy to be here now. And I hope that the connection will continue.
We spoke yesterday about various topics, mostly translation and everything that translation or text can turn into. So maybe you can tell us something about it, since you are involved with music, with theater, with poetry and with short stories.
Right. The creative impulse, be whatever it is, whether it's hammering stone or whether it is making music or creating words or giving them a form, all comes from this need to sort of make things, and for those things to take on a life of their own. And because of that, it's sort of been a reflex or a habit I've had since I was very, very little. And so I don't differentiate between genres. Sometimes something that begins as a poem ends up as a story, or ends up as a theater play, or ends up as a song on a record. And I see these things as very fluid. And so I thought we might begin with reading a poem. Željka will read the translation she's done in Croatian, and we can do numbers back and forth, like I'll do one, you do one, I'll do two. And this poem, to give you guys a little bit of context, had to do with this moment when we were all in lockdown, and when we were living in contemporary times, a medieval situation, which is this situation of having to deal with disease that was threatening many of our lives, and this brought on a lot of isolation. And this isolation has affected us deeply, I think, and some people so deeply that they find it hard to get back to being in contact with others, find it hard to completely become social again. And so these are a series of images that came to mind during and around that situation. And I related it, this came to me when I was actually floating in the Caribbean on my back, and I was thinking about the fact that in some sense this lockdown gave us the opportunity but also the danger of kind of continuing to float forever, which I think can be quite dangerous and almost tempting. So let me begin. I'll read English and she'll read Spanish. And then after that, you'll see one of these examples of this fluidness I'm talking about between genres, and we'll show you what happened with this poem, taking it to the level of performance in theater. Okay. Airs of drawing nigh and of the distance. 1. Your smell, feeling the now of the rub against your skin, unlike your taste, the touch you left fades. We are present between butterfly blinking, the winging of looks, the caress alights and then flits off.
Melodije privlačenja i razdaljine. Želim te omirisati, osjetiti živi dodir tvoje puti. Suprotno tome okusu, trag dodira koji si ostavila nestaje. Postojimo u treptaju leptirovih krila, usplahirenih pogleda. Letimičan dodir i već potom nema ga.
2. Tied to the dock, the boats nudge one another, finding. Salt and sun gnaw their moorings. Later, face down on the rocks, they remember months drifting before splintering, turning in circles above the anchor of affection.
2. Svezani o pristan, brodovi se diraju i susreću. Sol i sunce taru im konope. Poslije, izvrnuti na stjenju, sjećaju se pustih mjeseci plovidbe prije no što će se nasukati, kružeći nad sidrištem osjećanja.
3. An opaque and insubstantial cloud never could caress the sky. A hot, transparent breath always yearned to return to the body that expelled it. The longings of the breeze between leaves at the beginning of the year smell like moss and flowers.
3. Oblak, taman i pamučast, nikad se nije uspio nježno dotaknuti neba. Vruć i providan dah uvijek je žudio vratiti se tijelu koje ga je izdušilo. Čežnje za povjetarcem u krošnji početkom godine mirišu na mahovinu i cvijeće.
We live on both sides of the drum's skin, but we insist on sounding. Souls vibrate, souls dance together in the cloth of the partitions between hospital cots.
4. Živimo s obje strane kožne opne bubnja i ustrajno odjekujemo. Duše trepere, duše zajedno plešu u tkanini zavjesa između bolničkih kreveta.
5. Why mention you if you've left? A brightness on the surface of time. The heat that emanates from the whispering waves opens on territories beyond the reach of sound. A coat became patches floating on the darkness.
Zašto da te spominjem kad si otišla? Tek si bljesak na površini vremena. Toplina koja se diže s uzbibanih valova otvara se dalekim prostranstvima kamo ne dopire zvuk. Kaput postaje poderotina, lepršav u tami.
6. The echo of a simple beating refracts. A figure dissolves in a column of light, retracting strums the string.
6. Jeka udaha lomi se. Tijelo se pretapa u svjetlosni stup. Pri povlačenju škripe strune.
7. What does not being sound like? To go from being a punctuation mark on the horizon to not being even the marker fallen out of the book of time. What is the essence of absence?
7. Kako li zvuči nebivanje? Kao kad putokaz na obzorju postane beznačajnijim od straničnika iskliznulog iz knjige vremena? Ima li uopće smislenosti u odsutnosti?
Okay, now if we could look at
yeah.
the video, the first video, please. This is what became of that poem.
Quiero olerte, sentir el ya del roce de tu piel, a diferencia de tu sabor. La huella que dejaste se desvanece. Estamos presentes entre parpadeos de mariposa, aleteos de miradas. El tacto se posa y se desprende. Amarrados al muelle, los botes se juntan y se encuentran. La sal y el sol ruñen sus ataduras. Después, boca abajo sobre las rocas, recuerdan meses a la deriva antes de astillarse. Girar sobre el ancla de un afecto. Una nube opaca e insustancial nunca pudo acariciar el cielo. Un aliento caliente y transparente siempre quiso volver al cuerpo que lo expulsó. Las añoranzas de la brisa entre las hojas a comienzos del año huelen a musgo y flores. Vivimos a ambos lados de la piel del tambor, pero insistimos en sonar. Las almas vibran, las almas bailan juntas en la tela del biombo entre camillas. ¿Para qué mencionarte si te has ido? Un resplandor sobre la superficie del tiempo. El calor que emana del susurro del oleaje se abre a territorios más allá de donde alcanza el sonido. Un abrigo vuelto parches flotantes sobre la oscuridad. El eco de un solo latido se refracta. Una figura se disuelve en una columna de luz. Retraerse rasguea la cuerda. ¿A qué suena no estar? Pasar de ser un signo de puntuación en el horizonte a no ser ni el separador caído del libro del tiempo. ¿Cuál es la esencia de la ausencia?
So thank you, Mario, for sharing with us this video. I guess it was filmed at the Parpadal Teatro.
It was filmed at Parpadal Teatro doesn't have a place, but it was Parpadal Teatro doesn't have a place.
Yeah, sorry.
But it was filmed at well-known theater in Medellin called Prevodilački, and it was a performance. It was we were talking about the first performances we were having where we could actually let the public in for the first time. We still couldn't get anywhere near them without wearing a mask, and so we tried to turn wearing the mask into part of the performance. The fact that she can touch her, she can't touch her, she can come closer, but there can't be really any contact, and there's always this attempt to have contact. And then we took plastic and we extended it all the way across the stage, huge sheets of plastic, and then cut a hole where her face and her arms could come through to make it look like she was floating at certain points, and then other times she was trying to get to the audience. So this, I thought we could include this as kind of an example of, translation can occur horizontally between languages, but it can also occur vertically between genres, between one kind of art and another kind of art. And so translation in the end means quite literally movement. And so that's what it's all about, trying to understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about Parpadal Teatro, which is a great part of your activity. What else can you tell us about it? Who is there? Who are your colleagues? Who are the participants? And how you survived this time when there were no theater shows,
right.
How you reached the public? I know that you did.
Well, the Parpadal Teatro basically is a project founded by my wife and I in 2003. And up to the moment, we've produced more than 20 plays, theater plays in Medellin in Colombia, and more than 30 performances. Performances meaning performance art, not a play per se. And well, the idea has always been, she's a full-time theater actress, and she has been for 40 years now. And so we were looking for this. We created Parpadal Teatro in order for us to do more personal projects. And so I usually do the writing, and I've done acting, and I've done directing, and she almost always is acting, and sometimes producing. So how did we survive? There's a lot of different ways in which we survived. One was that we didn't, it was never life or death, the economic aspect of it. So that's really important. That's really important because it became activity that we were just doing for ourselves. And actually, in many ways, we became more productive because we couldn't go out and do anything else. And so we were stuck. And so what we did some performances in our backyard, for example, and the audio-visual aspect of it allowed us to be able to share actually with a great number of people. And for example, things like this, it's just a little 6-minute video, but then it went to a couple of festivals, and it's won like 3 awards at international film festivals. So it's, and then suddenly somebody in Poland is making a comment about it, or somebody in Argentina is making a comment about it. And as a theater group as such, it would be very difficult for us to get to some of those places. And since those people were just as equally locked in as we were, they didn't have anything else to do than look at other people's videos and stuff. And so it became this very strangely paradoxical, productive period.
And how about music? There is also a band, I believe.
There are a couple of bands.
Oh.
And so there's a band called, the main band is called Sell the Elephant, which I started. Sell the Elephant, the title, I should explain first of all. Sell the Elephant is the last thing that a poor circus does. When a circus is going broke, you know it's over when you sold the elephant. So Sell the Elephant became kind of a way of thinking about always being on the edge of going broke. And it also has to do with a Russian joke. There's a Russian joke, two friends get together and one friend says, how's it going? The other one says, I just got an elephant. It's the greatest thing you've ever seen. The kids love to ride on it. You know, we never have robbers at the house because we've got this big elephant. You know, it's so beautiful to see it playing in the yard and everything. God, what would we have done if we hadn't gotten the elephant? And the other friend said, really? Is it really? And he said, yes. It's the best thing that ever happened to our family. And then, so he says, well, you know, are they easy to get, you know? And he said, well, you know, it's not hard. It's really not hard to get an elephant if you need to, you know? And he said, really, I'm thinking about it. Well, how much is it? He said, oh, it's cheap. Yeah, if it's cheap. He says, you know, I can give it to you for, I don't know how many rubles. And the other guy says, well, I'll give it a try. And he buys the elephant. They meet 6 months later. He says, so how's it going with the elephant? He goes, it's terrible. The elephant is a disaster. The elephant stepped on my neighbor's car. I had to pay I don't know how much money. You know what it's like cleaning up an elephant's shit all over the place. And the elephant, you know, and it's dangerous, and we don't know what to do with it, and who has food to feed an elephant? And the first friend says, my friend, if you keep talking this way, you'll never sell the elephant. And so that's where Sell the Elephant came from. So that's one group, Sell the Elephant, and there was another group called Underflavor, which was actually with a friend from Slovakia who lives in Medellin as well, and we played together. And but then he started having like very decent, real person kind of goals, like getting a job that paid every 2 weeks and stuff like that. And so that left me alone. So then I started Sell the Elephant, and the definition of Sell the Elephant is anybody who wants to play music. And so we now have like, I think it's like we're on the 9th album or 10th album, and some of it's available on Spotify and these kinds of platforms, and so yeah, Sell the Elephant's out there too.
Great. I was thinking whether we will have a look at the video of Chichak, or
we can do that, but then after that you can talk about how did this start? But let me read it first in Spanish.
Yes.
Because this is something you need to know about this poem. This poem is a lucky shot for me. You know, I was writing a poem and it just kind of worked out that way. You think, hey, that's kind of neat, and it came out okay. But that the translation worked is nothing short of like an act of God. You'll understand when you hear the two poems. Because there are different parts of translation that are really important. And well, obviously, one of the main important things is what does the poem mean? What is the poem trying to say? But there's also, in poetry particularly, a musical aspect to it. And an aspect for the ear and rhythmic. And it can become a really important part of the poem, and it happened to become a really important part of this poem, and then that gave her the totally impossible job of having to try to translate it in some way, and doing it successfully. Another weird aspect of this poem is, originally it was a poem in Spanish, and then I tried to translate it into English, and it didn't work at all. And so instead of translating it into English, what ended up happening is I wrote a second part. So the first stanza is in Spanish, and the second stanza is in English. Okay? So, and it's called cardo. Cardo means thistle. You guys know what a thistle is?
Chicha.
It's like a pointy little end of a plant that gets stuck on your pants and stuff. And it comes from a fado, a Portuguese love song, where it says that Ari dos Santos says, that he was following this sort of everlasting tenderness. And he was following it even though there were thistles all around it. And so that's where this poem comes from. And I'll read it in the original languages. Cardo, un ardo acobardo, resguardo en el que ardo, largo día de dardos, de tantos morados pardo, como amarrarlo sin sangrarlo, tardo en acabarlo, ya que ahí guardo lo que escardo. Thistle, why we all waste, while we all we whistle, all we taste, haste of gristle all a pile, why all we while away in haste, why this will fall, all a whistle, all a waste. And here's in Croatian. Patience. And volume.
Čičak, strašljivi kukavičak.
Čičak, strašljivi kukavičak, čuvar plamičak, dugočasni streličak, ljubičasti sivičak, kako ga oskriči bez krvi, dugo ga se mrvi, čuva tko ga počupa prvi. Zašto čička ne čuvamo? Zašto baš sve profučkamo? Sve probamo, žurno hrskamo, sve gomilamo. Zašto zid podižemo, dok žurno drugdje idemo? Zašto se obaramo, fučkamo, profučkamo?
Now, I know that that's a good translation because I played that video for 5 or 6 people who don't know a syllable of Croatian. And they thought, what a great poem. They don't even care what it
Maybe
means.
they were more thrilled than those who understand Croatian.
But what I mean is that a translation can do that across languages is something that never happens. And so when you get lucky like that's the kind of translation that can ruin all your other translations for about a month. Because you think, oh God, it just worked. How did it happen? And you have it there and now you don't know how to do it again. But yeah.
So, we can tell you how it all happened actually. I am a literary translator and I translate prose from French and Spanish and occasionally from English and occasionally poetry. And this bracket occasionally is a space for bravery and foolishness, which happened in late summer 3 years ago. We were on the island of Brač. It was actually working summer. I was involved with translations. Kids were involved with summer jazz music school or with stone carving school in Pučišća. I was very happy, just finished a book that I really liked from Aramburu, Patria. I was dealing with few interviews because he was to come to Zagreb to Frakturas festival in September. And I already started a new book that I already felt I really like from French author Jean-Baptiste Delamont. And then, out of nowhere, Tomica Bajsić, our poet and president of PEN Croatia, sent an email and asked whether I would be interested to translate like few poems. And I was like, but I'm so curious and I can hardly ever say no. And then I was sort of thinking whether I have time or not. And then he said, like sort of to encourage me, he said, but they're not too extensive, which is like, not a measure of anything, extensiveness. But somehow I agreed to it. He said there are only like, 5, 6, we ended with 12 in the end or so. And then, I happily started reading it. At first, summer evenings, the breeze, beautiful weather, beautiful view. It was like ideal for poetry.
I got lucky.
But then at second reading I was like, what is this? You know how it happens with the poetry. It all depends on when you read it, where you read it, how do you feel, what do you hear, what do you see, and then I just somehow got sort of afraid because I couldn't really decide whether this has something to do with love passion or whether it is some sort of disease or whether this is some sort of natural disaster. It could turn either way. And then I started with the first one, and then soon enough I decided that, there's no way that I can do like fourth or fifth, But then, every other day is a new day and you see it with different eyes, you hear it differently, and somehow we managed to have it all. At that time I didn't know Mario. I even forgot at that moment that he will actually be in Zagreb and I will actually hear him read the original poems and that someone will be actually reading those translations of mine displayed on wall, or that Ivan Tolerić, our actor, he was invited to one of the readings, he interpreted poems, so it was all very exciting when we finally met in Zagreb, but also frightening because, as I said the other day, it's very nice to hear authors say their poems, but some don't really take the full advantage of it, of the occasion. Mario, for instance, he really does take advantage of moments that he reads his poetry, as you just heard. And then I realized when he started reading that he is giving some introduction to each poem, that he's explaining sort of like, something about it, and that he may reveal something that will not appear in the translation. So this was like the first fear, but in the end...
I talk too much before I read my poem.
But in the end everything was just fine, which encouraged us to later on continue with other poems, and that resulted in a little book of poems. We had some nice evenings at the Maria Jurić-Zagorka library, where Ivan Tolerić was so overwhelmed that he in the end took a guitar and he sang a song for Mario. Then there was nice reading at the Meštrović pavilion, and we maintained our contact. We were working on this little collection, on the book, and then we were following what was going on during lockdown in Colombia or in Croatia, and that only showed how it's good to be brave and a little bit foolish, because then you really widen your horizons, you come in contact with people, with distant countries, with new voices, with new ideas, with new approaches, with new type of texts. And Mario, I always followed, whatever he did with his band or with the theater or with his poetry or with short stories. Occasionally we were discussing whether we might do something more.
But she is always working. She always has 4 books on top of her. And so I have to dig through the 4 books. Could we do a poem, maybe a little bit, a couple of paragraphs over here? Oh, I don't know.
But we agreed,
700 pages of Aramburu to go. I don't know.
But we agree that we are the lucky ones, because all those who are involved with some creative work didn't suffer as much during the period of lockdown and Corona, because we were so busy doing things that we maybe didn't even notice. And maybe even occasionally we were happy that we had some extra time, or left alone, where that was difficult because kids were at home, schools were off. Anyway, it happened so that this spring Mario sent me one of the short stories, which I really liked. Not that I didn't like the other ones, but somehow I thought, okay, maybe after such a long time I should really do something. And that's a very nice story, Letanía para la Virgen Negra. and I've translated it without really knowing what will we do about it. And then I approached Tema book magazine, and they said they'll gladly publish it. And now in September it will be published as a book. We only have it in electronic version so far, which is great because Mario will be able to have a copy while he's here, and that was a nice welcome event.
I'm sort of very slowly talking to her about maybe translating the rest of the book. We'll see.
Well, that's the plan, and that's why we've invited Mario to be our guest at our residency. So he will be here with us for the next 3 weeks. He will also participate again at the poetry readings as a part of the Festival of Fraktura, which starts on Sunday. We will have some readings in the library, Mario Angel again, and then Mario will also appear in conversation with Bojan Krištofić at Radio Student, Radio Borba, so maybe that will be a chance to tell us more about Colombia and things South America and what's going on. So, yes. During the lockdown period, Mario was always trying to be very active and to reach the readers, to reach the public, and then he had a great idea that maybe translators or actors or poets from the countries he was translated in Italy or elsewhere,
in Lebanon too.
In Lebanon too, may eventually read and feel themselves reading. That's why this Čičak appeared like this, and it happened so at Kajzerica, where very near the school there is such a nice field full with thistles. And while I was waiting for my son, who had an entry exam for the art school, I was sort of very much inspired by the field. So it only just happened, and then when I noticed that he had other people participating in those readings, we said, why wouldn't we do something like that? And then again, next year, so first year at Brač, there was the introduction to Mario's poetry when I started translations without knowing him, without knowing whether I'm, on the safe ground, how it will be. The year after, we were again in Pučišća at Brač, and we decided to film some of the poems. So maybe now we can see what we did there with one of the poems, but Mario will first read it.
Okay. Okay, this poem, in the broadest of senses, is about membranes. Okay, as you may have noticed, contact and separation have been very important themes in these last couple of years. And in this case, I use the word ampolla. And ampolla means like when you get a blister. And a blister is when the skin lifts off the rest of the body and there's liquid underneath in order to protect the body because there's been some sort of trauma on that. Now, this can go all the way from being human skin to being in Colombia. It's very common for us because an example at the moment is the last 3 months, practically every day it's rained. And so the water starts to get into the walls and starts to lift up the paint, and it begins to bubble up off the walls. And it forms these strange shapes, and the same as blisters in your hand. And I saw these blisters as if they were lizards moving over surfaces. And so it's talking about that, about separation, about membranes, and about what happens with time to surfaces and how they age. I should put my glasses back on. So that, what you just heard, was one of those introductions that scares Željka to death every time I do them, because she thinks, oh my God, he's going to say the poem's about something totally different than what I translated. Because as you might have noticed, they're not absolutely explicit and they're not meant to be. So here we go. I'll do it in Spanish. Oh, another thing I wanted to comment on. This thing that happened with the videos is like a really, you talked about how we kept busy. It's a really beautiful thing. I put out a book before that in Spanish called La Materialidad. And I really liked the book and I really wanted it to get out there. But we couldn't, normally you do a book launch. And in Medellin, for example, this is a really big deal. Everybody comes and you read the poems and people go away with the book. And it's a really important moment for a book of poetry. But that couldn't happen because we couldn't get together. We weren't allowed to get together for more than 10 people or 15 people. So what I did was I called up, or I wrote to all of my friends, and I said, listen, I need you to help me with this book. Here's the book, pick a poem, and do something with it. And whatever you do with it, please film it. Do a video of it. I don't care if it's with your cell phone, I don't care how you do it, but just do something. It turns out at the end, the entire book, they did the entire book. 22 different friends put out videos, different videos, everything from dance videos, somebody else did a performance, somebody else did like an editing job with a bunch of video that existed about jungles for one particular, for Finenverde. And so now on YouTube, you can either read the book as a book, or you can actually watch the whole book in 22 different videos. And so that same year that book came out, I had books coming out in Italian, and this book, and a book in Arabic. And so that's when we began to say, hey, this may be a good way to get people involved. And so I mentioned it to Željka, and it became a kind of vacation project. And I think that's great because it's like getting us used to making kind of diaries. Like when we're on our own and when we have more time and stuff, filling our time with content that matters to us or that we've worked with or that's important. And so I'm really happy that this happened with these poems. So what's happening to me is what happened to this poet. It's American poet Philip Levine. I always make fun of, which is really unfair to him. He's a very important poet. But I make fun of him because as he got older, his introductions became twice as long as his poems. And so basically you went to go see Philip Levine to hear him introduce his poems. Because it ended up being in an hour-long program, you'd hear like 5 minutes of poem and like 55 minutes of introduction. So I'm afraid
almost there.
I'm afraid I'm contracting this disease, but I'm so sorry. My apologies, but here's the poem. Lagartijas de agua bajan en arabescos por la superficie interior del muro. Luego, el látex, un pellejo inflado, denuncia la ampolla ya ausente y se raja, se descascara en archipiélagos de rendición al aire, a la temperatura, al tiempo.
So we did 11 of those and we really enjoyed it. And like the year later, we heard it sometimes differently, or some clouds or something just gave us the idea to accompany the poem. So. And sometimes
Željka managed to
make
her family get involved. I don't know how voluntarily or not.
Oh, very glad, very glad.
But you're going to see an example. Again, rhythm and music in poetry is really important to me.
vodeni gušteri, ornamentalno klize unutrašnjom površinom zida. Zatim mliječni sok,
vodeni
navrata
gušteri,
koža, otkriva
ornamentalno
većanstvo
klize
i puta
unutrašnjom površinom zida.
kao niska otoka
Zatim mliječni
koji
sok,
sparavaju.
navrata koža, otkriva već nestali lik i puca.
Vodeni gušteri,
Ljušti se kao niska otoka što isparavaju
zatim
u
mliječni sok,
toplini,
navrata
u vremenu.
otkriva već nestali lik i puca, ljušti se kao niska otoka što isparavaju u toplini.
Bravo, hvala vam. My family. Maybe I could read it, huh?
Okay.
Grammarly makes communication at work one click simpler.
Okay. So, vodeni gušteri. Oh. Sorry, title is like the start of the sentence, which always sort of makes me a little bit. I lose the rhythm. Vodeni gušteri ornamentalno klize unutrašnjom površinom zida. Zatim mliječni sok, nabrekla koža, otkriva već nestali plik i puca. Ljušti se kao niska otoka što isparavaju u toplini u vremenu. So, what else can we say? You said something very interesting about the translation the other day and the impression it gives, like, the car accident.
Yeah, like, people think that translation is about rigor. In other words, people think that translation is about try really hard, put in a lot of work, be very exact. That's nonsense. It's nonsense in the sense that, yes, you have to do all of that, but that's just like the beginning. Because before you can translate, you have to have lived that poem. Now, what do I mean by that, by lived that poem? Obviously, I mean reading it, but a poem is something that happens to a reader. A poem is not simply an information bit. It's supposed to be like a sensation, like an event. And because it's an event, translating it depends on the sort of sensory apparatus of the translator. So the example I give is that you witness a car crash in the street. Now, you're the translator. You can't be wrong. You witnessed what you witnessed. That's what you saw. I saw a white blur, and then I heard a crash, and then I heard a woman scream. And that's the poem, right? But what you notice is that even though that person can't be wrong, that's what they experience, that's their experience of the poem, you find that some experiences are more elaborate than others. Somebody says, oh, well, it's because he was moving really fast and then he swerved and then somebody opened a car door and then that car door flew into the air and you hear it crash. And then that's the moment when the child across the street was about to cross, but he didn't. And then suddenly you have this other version where there's a lot more detail and depth and sensory engagement. And so I see translation not as retelling something. It's you recreate an event. So a translator has not only the added burden of being faithful to the original, but must create a work of art again. Must create something. A translator can't simply be, well, this is a poem about this and that and this. No, a translator has to make the thing happen again in a different context. In a context where the words that the author used to get there may not be available in the language. And so how do I get there? How do I make it happen again? But in this other place, in this other language, and every language has a history, and every language has a way in which it explains itself and grows. And so it's a really wild undertaking to decide to be a translator. you know, because you really are getting into something like magic, and yet you're coming from something that already existed, but you have to forget that completely and make it exist again.
Of course, I have so much to say about it, but I rather not, because what you said is so beautiful and nice, and I don't want to spoil it.
That's not the point.
Shall we?
Another poem?
If you want, yes.
Sure.
Or if there's
Which one?
anything
Which one
else
should we
you
do?
want to...
Or questions? Does anybody have any questions or wonder about any of this? I would have a couple.
Mike.
I wrote a poem here in Zagreb the last time I was here. I was sitting in the hotel's Palace. I don't know how you say it, but that's
Closed.
the one that's closed now, for the moment at least. Well, they're renovating it. Is that the idea?
Due to the earthquake.
Right. A very, really wild Art Nouveau hotel here, and I'd been spending a few days, and at that time, I mean, pen is really important. Don't get me wrong. Pen is very important. But Fraktura had this really like glitzy thing going on with their festival. And so all the Fraktura writers were like, hi, I'm really somebody. And all us pen writers, we were all like, we write things, you know. And so they were really like slick, and we were really sort of like visiting. And so I was sitting in the lobby of this hotel, and I was watching famous people walk by, like Aramburu, etc. And I was just thinking, this is a really weird space of time. I'm just kind of floating here. Like I'm waiting for the driver to pick me up, to take me to the airport. Nothing's happening. I'm in a hotel. A hotel is already a place that isn't really a place. It's kind of a place for between places. And some German poet came up to me and he was saying, I don't know what, some German thing. And about, he was being a poet, you know, like with capital P. And I wasn't really listening to him, and I was looking out the window at that street, like many streets here in Zagreb, where you think you can cross the street. And the first time I tried to do that sort of innocently in front of that particular hotel, I also almost had my nose taken off by a streetcar, by a tram. And so I realized that no, one crosses the street with a lot of caution, unless you want to be, you know, eliminated by a cyclist or a tram or something passing by very quickly. So there I was, looking out the window, watching the tram go by and the cyclists go by, and I thought, this is a really weird parenthesis in my life. And so I wrote this poem. A poem I can honestly say was written in Zagreb. And it's called The Lulling Time. Do you guys know what a lull is? A lull is this like hole between two events. You know? Like, oh, we had a lot of activity in March, and then we had a lot of activity in May, and then they say, well, what about April? April was kind of a lull. That's what a lull is. So this is called The Lulling Time, which is no comment on Zagreb, it's more of a comment on my particular life. The lulling time when moths alight on insubstantial objects, not of this moment exactly, subjects, perhaps in some memory, galloping from all beck and call, rocking on rough waves recalled, through the reeds and into some reverie drifted, a never-every. Lulled away, lull a night, lull a light far, far away in the dark.
Kad usneš, dok moćci slijeću na nepostojane predmete koji nisu od ovog trenutka, u stvari postoje možda u nekoj uspomeni, bježeći od svake raspoloživosti sjećanja na valjanje po grdnom valu, kroz trsku i šaš, usnovit izravno klizeći, nikad sasvim, usnuti u san, usnuti u noć, usnuti svjetlosnim godinama i još dalje u mrak. Shall we end up with the dark and with the mrak, or?
Just in the dark. You can all just drift off into the dark. Or do you want to end with something else?
No, it's up to you. Or it's up to me, let's see.
Yeah, it's up to you. No questions.
Maybe.
Nobody wants to know
No.
anything about anything?
I know.
Take
maybe.
advantage of I'm under the gun. I have this microphone. I have to answer whatever you ask.
Maybe I could read the first one ever. Let me just...
Oh, the first one you ever translated?
Yes,
Oh, that'd
yes.
be cool. Which one was that?
Yours.
Yeah, I get it.
Oops.
You don't have it?
Well, I
It's in
do.
this book.
I do. No. I do. But where it is? Sorry. I prepared everything and now it's gone.
I know it's there.
Aha. I know. It's long before the Dandelion.
Ah,
Huh?
okay. Should I read it?
Yeah, definitely. But I forgot to put it to the end.
Okay, this is a poem about the end of summer, and that weird feeling you have of summer, and in summer sometimes, like you're floating, like you're flying. I can't explain it; it's very hard to explain. But to me, it's related to. Do you know what a dandelion is? A dandelion is this little flower it's yellow and it has these seeds that come off it in kind of a dome, and you blow on it and the seeds fly. And so that's how I feel about the end of summer.
And this is this moment, end of April or end of August or...
Right, although we are in September now. Yeah, okay. This is a moment yesterday. Okay. Now it's too late.
It's too late. It's
This will
gone.
be the next poem. I don't know what the next poem is. Long before the dandelion shakes out its mane again, when light dangles and the lines between the rain, wind-raked sediment, this place pours its mouth of gulls, embossing the air oared upon by our voices, dull with tossing, the loss between us, like a mirror, reflects our wings. That is, we feel them bent back as pushed through they hold us, plummet, bundle, tremble. What we send tilted, funneled, fastened, cold to low buildings, paling. Out beyond us. Out, sliver in clouds of light. We have not returned, scraped, curled, or grayed this hidden roaring tight around our falls.
Dugo prije što maslačak opet strese svoju grivu, dok se svjetlost koleba i provlači kroz kišne kapi, vjetrom šibanu zavjesu, ovo mjesto napuči svoj zaljev galebovima, načička zrak uskovitlan našim glasovima, ustajao od predbacivanja. Praznina između nas, poput zrcala, odražava naša krila. Osjećajmo naime da su izvijena jer u naletu ona nas drže. Pikira smo tuljak, podrhtava, ono što odasla smo napušeno, usmjereno, hladno pripijeno uz ograde niskih zgrada, ondje daleko od nas, vani, pukotina u oblacima svjetlosti. Nismo uzvratili, slomljeni, zgureni ili posivjeli, te potmuli huk, stopljen s našim padanjem.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.